What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to the SI Sooners podcast. Man, I'm telling you, the season of oddities continues. 1 week after the season opener, that is, 1 week after playing an absolute rum-dum of an FCS opponent, the Sooners had the week off. Open date, bye week. Now, we turn our attention to the Big 12 Conference opener. Yeah, we're there. One game in, open date, conference games are here. I mean, that's what we're up against. It's crazy. Kansas State comes to Norman this Saturday, and I got to say, the big story out of Manhattan is not that OU is thinking about some payback. We know they are. But Parker, we're actually just trying to get back to the starting line of wondering if we're ever going to get this game played. Chris Kleiman, the coach at Kansas State, said on his radio show Thursday night that, quote, they haven't had a good week dealing with COVID, Parker. What do you think? We're going to get this thing played?
Well, the good news is, John, now that we're into Big 12 play, we're abiding by the Big 12's rules, which is you got 53 guys, you got enough to play. So unless half of Kansas State's roster is wiped out, I think there's a pretty good chance we're going to see the Sooners and the Wildcats hit the field this weekend. Now, what that looks like for Kansas State, I don't know. If they're down some of their premier skill position players, it might just be all the more of a slaughter for Oklahoma, because we know, right, we saw when Oklahoma took on Missouri State that they're extremely deep. We can't say the same for Kansas State. You look at the team that beat Oklahoma last year in Manhattan. This is not the same team here in 2020. They lost a lot of guys already, and if any of their key players have to sit out, it really widens the chasm in terms of talent between K-State and Oklahoma.
I'm John Hoover. I'm in Tulsa. That's Parker Thune. He's over there in Norman. Thanks for listening to the SI Sooners podcast. Thanks for watching the SI Sooners podcast on YouTube, of course. And we also like to thank our advertisers who've jumped on board. Big shout out to Trade Pros for being first in line. You guys rock. More to come from them after the first segment. Parker, since it's week one of Big 12 play, we need to look into the rest of the league. We've already talked a little bit about K-State. We're going to get deeper into it. But we've already talked about K-State, Kansas, and Iowa State going 0-3 against the Sun Belt. And Texas Tech needing a 2-point conversion to stop, avoid losing to FCS Houston Baptist. But this weekend we've got new evidence that the Big 12 stinks and that OU and Texas, to a lesser extent, have absolutely no wiggle room in case anyone's thinking about the college football playoff, Parker.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you just look at the way that the conference outside of the Sooners has kind of sleepwalked out of the gate, and to some degree that's understandable just given the circumstances. But man, it has been a rough first couple of weeks for the Big 12, and you're exactly right, John. It's created a situation in which right now, as things stand today, the SEC and the Big 10 haven't even started play yet. But the Big 12, and specifically Oklahoma, already has no wiggle room in terms of their odds of going to the college football playoff. If Oklahoma loses, I would think that's got to be it for them, just based on the fact that there are so few competitive teams in the Big 12. I mean, you look at Texas as maybe the one team that you can identify right now and say, okay, that team's definitely going to be ranked in the top 25 at year's end. I don't know if you can say the same for any of the other schools across the Big 12, and that's not an ideal situation for Oklahoma, because what do we know about the Sooners? Every year, John, they trip up. It's always a different point along the line. It's always a different school, it seems like, but somewhere along the line, in completely unexpected fashion, Oklahoma drops one that nobody sees coming. And they always seem to be right on the precipice, right on the bubble of the college football playoff, or back in the old days, the BCS. But Oklahoma, if they want to have a legitimate chance to compete in the college football playoff this year, they're going to need to win out. They're going to need to have a zero in that loss column when bowl season comes around, because this is not the same season that they played last year, the year before, or the year before that. The circumstances are different, things have changed, and there is absolutely no room for error for the Sooners.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, and I wrote that earlier in the week. Now, what that means is I think Oklahoma could stand a loss to Texas in October if they come back and beat the Longhorns in December in the Big 12 championship game like they did in 2018, Kyler Murray's year. I think they could get in possibly that way. But what you're talking about is there's nothing left for the Big 12 to measure itself up against other conferences. There's no more non-conference games. I mean, every time there's a non-conference game that gets scheduled, it gets bumped. Look at Baylor and Houston, which we'll talk about in a minute. The Big 12 is out of opportunities. from here on out, if Oklahoma runs the table against they'll be fine, get in the playoff, of course. But if they suffer a loss somewhere along the way in the Big 12 play, there's nothing to compare it to because the rest of the Big 12, as we've seen in non-conference play, stinks. Now, I want to talk real quick about Oklahoma's. We talked about, Parker, the Sooners' victory 48-0 over Missouri State. We talked about that at length throughout last week. I don't know if we ever hit on the fact that Oklahoma played pretty perfect in that game. And what I mean by that, you didn't see the tackle busts. I know it's just Missouri State. I know, Hoover, calm down. It's just Missouri State. But you didn't see the tackle bust that you typically see in any, season opener, let alone a season opener that's been afflicted by COVID like this one has. Okay, so you saw Oklahoma prepared at a high level. I thought you saw the coaching staff have those guys ready to play, and I thought those guys had the right mental frame of mind, Parker, to be able to carry out their simply execute their what am I trying to say? Their assignments on a given play. They tackled, they gang tackled, they blocked well on offense for the most part, a little bit on the offensive line. We'll get into that in a minute as well. But the passing game was fantastic, Parker. Everything, it looked sharp. It looked like Oklahoma was in like week 3 or week 4 compared to the rest of the Big 12 was still in COVID protocol.
Yeah, it really was a flawless performance from the Sooners all the way around. And it's the performance that they needed, quite frankly, John, because what do we talk about at the end of every year when we're stacking up teams' resumes in the college football playoff? We talk about their non-conference schedule. They schedule FBS teams or did they schedule FCS teams? And I get that this is a year where you can't really ding teams for having an FCS team as their non-conference opponent just because of the way things shook out. I don't think that's going to be as much of a talking point as it has been in years past. However, here's what I can say. There's absolutely nothing that the committee can infer from that Oklahoma-Missouri State game to knock the Sooners on Selection Day because there, quite frankly, was not any flaw in their performance. You can't say, sure they won, sure they scored 70 points, but they gave up 20. No, Oklahoma pitched a shutout and had their offensive starters on the bench by the third quarter. And all in all, that was as impressive a performance as Oklahoma could have asked for against an FCS team. And that's just going to be another thing that they're going to be able to hold up whenever they're having that conversation in December or whenever it ends up being about who's going to go to the college football playoff. And you think about this, John, the Pac-12 is out of the picture. We don't have to worry about the enigma that is the Pac-12 anymore. Will they come back and play? Maybe, but right now they're dealing with wildfires in addition to COVID-19. That region of the country is in no state to play football at the moment. It's just not going to happen, and it shouldn't happen right now. But what that means is you've got 4 conferences, presumably each of whom will have one representative at the end of the year that will be in contention for a college football playoff berth. And when you look at those 4 conferences, top to bottom, the Big 12 is the worst. And I don't think that's a question. Even the ACC has some very talented teams. It's not just Clemson. We've seen North Carolina and we've seen Miami come out of the gate very strong. And obviously the Big 10 and the SEC are going to be as solid as ever. So Oklahoma really needs to continue to play perfect football because any slip up that they have, however slight, even if it doesn't result in a loss, trust me, the committee is going to look for every single point to pick Oklahoma at in December, simply because they're now the ones coming from the worst conference. They're the ones with the resume that to the naked eye isn't going to match up with the rest of the country. And is that unfair? Maybe. I mean, obviously the Sooners can't do anything about the fact that the rest of their conference is bad. But what they can do is they can go out and win every week. And in years past, they've done that for the most part, but it seems like there's always been that one game that they trip up. And that can't happen this time around.
No slip-ups, even in the age of COVID. We shall see. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, we're going to pull apart Oklahoma State's 16-7 win over Tulsa and what that could mean long-term for the Sooners. Trade Pros Heat and Air in Oklahoma City. Whether you just need service or a mini-split for your home office, studio, or man cave, or if you're finally ready to upgrade to a more efficient train system for your entire home, get a free estimate from Trade Pros for all your heating and air needs. Trade Pros earned a Best of 2020 award from Home Advisor and has nothing but 5-star reviews on Google. Go to TradeProsOKC.com or call 405-675-0176 or just book your appointment on Facebook. Trade Pros, that's one word, Trade Pros Heat and Air. On social media, you can follow SI Sooners on Twitter, for instance, at @all_Sooners. Find Parker at Parker Thune, Thune, and I am, of course, at John E. Hoover. Parker is also on Instagram, Parker Thune. I'm on Facebook, John E. Hoover Media. And over on YouTube is where you'll find the video version of this podcast. If you're tired of listening to us and you want to see our ugly mugs and see what we look like and maybe point your fingers at us, we're right there on YouTube, as well as a bunch of other OU videos like our post-game wrap-up, which was very popular last week. We got press conferences up there. We got lots of interviews with the Sooner Summit guys, all kinds of stuff. Just get on there, John Hoover Media on my YouTube channel, and scroll down. Again, thanks to the guys at Trade Pros for getting on the SI Sooners podcast train. You were the first one to board. You will not be the last. If you own a business and you like what you hear out of this podcast, or what you see in this case, or you want to advertise with us, we have a lot of options to fit your needs. We can do regular commercial spots, just like that one, just like our friends at Trades Pros, or we can do segment sponsorships. We're going to have a segment coming up this Wednesday. We're going to open up the mailbag. It's going to be fun. And if you want to contact us about advertising, just drop us an email, allsoonersi@gmail.com. Now, Parker, I watched every play of the Oklahoma State-Tulsa game. You may not have, because you said on Twitter it was possibly the worst FBS game you've ever seen. I'm not ready to go that far. I've seen a lot of games. But listen, I know it was the season opener. I know both teams have been dealing with their own issues in regards to COVID, especially TU. TU was just ravaged. Got something like 7 practices in out of their first 17 practice days, including their quarterback, who missed the early part of training camp. Would have missed that game if they had played it last week. But man, I got to say, both teams looked rusty on offense. Maybe more than rusty. Maybe like kind of rusted out, a little bit of broken maybe. I don't know. We'll see. You think that's what we're just going to see out of teams, Parker, on a week-to-week basis this year with all that's going on in the COVID situation?
Well, yeah, I think to some element you have to lower the expectations. And yeah, you're right. I did go on Twitter and I said it was probably the worst FBS game I've ever watched. Now, you got to keep in mind here, John, you've been watching college football for 30 years longer than I have. So you've got a lot more of a mental database to pull from than I do. But it was an ugly, ugly game, especially for a team in Oklahoma State that got so much love all offseason as the team that was finally going to pull up alongside Oklahoma and Texas and make some noise in the race for the Big 12 championship. And whatever team took the field against Tulsa on Saturday was not that team. And Chuba Hubbard, man, that guy just looked different, John. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a result of rust, like you mentioned. I don't know if it was just the fact that they didn't get as many practices in the offseason. But, man, he looked tentative hitting those holes. We didn't see the same aggression, the same desire from Chuba Hubbard, it seemed like. And credit to the Tulsa defense because they did their part in keeping him in check. But, man, the Chuba Hubbard that I saw did not match the Chuba Hubbard that I watched in 2019. And that's got to be a real concern for Oklahoma State, especially if Spencer Sanders' injury keeps him out of action, because we saw them run into quite significant quarterback issues. Ethan Bullock really floundered for a couple quarters before eventually they just turned to the true freshman, Shane Illingworth, a guy that I've been talking about, John. I really like what Illingworth brings to the table, and I actually mentioned in the preseason I think we would see him at some point this year for Oklahoma State. I didn't know it was going to be this soon. I didn't think anybody expected it to be this soon, but I do think at some point down the line here, there may be a bit of a quarterback competition between Spencer Sanders and Shane Illingworth at Oklahoma State. Now, all of that aside, not an impressive performance for Oklahoma State, and they should have mopped the floor with Tulsa. Tulsa is a decent AAC program, but if Oklahoma State is going to insert themselves into the college football playoff conversation, and that's the level that some people are putting them on heading into this 2020 season, if that's the expectation for Oklahoma State, they really came up short in a big way on Saturday, and that cannot be repeated.
They looked like they were coming from behind, like they were the team that had a quarterback out with COVID. They were the team that had 20 guys, and they were the team that had 7 practices in August. Oklahoma State looked really kind of just out of sorts and disheveled, and final score was 16-7. And really, if you think about it, Tulsa missed numerous chances to win this game, not get close or stay respectable. They had multiple chances to win this game. They had a touchdown called back and then missed a field goal. I mean, that's 7 points. They called timeout, had a field goal taken off the board that went through the uprights perfectly. They had 15 penalties, which was 2 off the school record. A lot of those were pre-snap penalties or delay of game penalties, or the coaches couldn't get the play in from the sideline. Oklahoma State would see this late play coming in and substitutions, and so Oklahoma State would run a bunch of defenders on, and then the clock starts ticking down. I remember Zach Smith, the quarterback, looking at the ref saying, "Hey, restart the clock." And he goes, "We're not going to restart the clock. You guys subbed late, so they subbed late." It was a total disorganized mess. Neither team was ready to play. Every play before the snap, it seemed like Tulsa was in the soup. It just felt like every play. If Tulsa had its act together, it would have won the game. Now, we acknowledge Spencer Sanders got hurt early in the game. That changes everything for Oklahoma State, of course. But what does Mike Gundy do? He rolls out the wrong backup quarterback again. He's perfected that, Parker. He's made it an art form to play the wrong guy at quarterback. He picks the wrong guy 10 times out of 10. This is not an anomaly. This is not I didn't see that. No, listen, word is that Shane Illingworth missed a bunch of time because of COVID and supposedly, quote unquote, wasn't ready to play. Yeah, well, he looked ready to play to me when he finally got in the game. I mean, Ethan Bullock, the guy that Mike Gundy thought was ready, clearly wasn't ready. I mean, the reason this game was postponed was because Tulsa's quarterback, Zach Smith, had missed the last 2 weeks with COVID. He started, he played, he looked ready, well, for the most part. He played okay at times, but Illingworth looked good. When he replaced Bullock, he goes 4 out of 5, 74 yards. Most importantly, he led 3 scoring drives when the Oklahoma State offense appeared dead in the water, Parker.
Definitely. And like I said, Illingworth is a guy that brings a lot of talent to the table. He was a top 10 quarterback, top 10 pro-style quarterback in his recruiting class, in that class of 2020 coming out of California. And like I said, John, and I really do believe this, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I was not impressed with Spencer Sanders last year. And I think if there is a better option on the table, Mike Gundy's got to look at it. And I think Shane Illingworth showed flashes on Saturday and showed that there's a decent chance he can be a better option than Spencer Sanders. I'm telling you, I would not be surprised if by the end of the season, if even by midseason, Oklahoma State has a quarterback controversy on their hands, because I think Illingworth has that much promise. And I do think that Sanders, being as mistake-prone as he is, and not having quite the arm strength and the downfield throwing ability that Shane Illingworth has, especially when you've got a guy like Tylan Wallace on the outside, Oklahoma State's offensive setup, to me, is a lot more conducive to Illingworth's success than Sanders. Now, am I completely alone with that take? I could be. But I'm just saying, don't be surprised if it plays out that way.
This is episode 13 of the SI Sooners podcast, and I think we just had our high point. We just had our greatest moment ever. Parker has called a quarterback controversy in Stillwater between a true freshman and a returning starter. Parker, I love it. Keep it going. Oklahoma State lost 3 starting linemen in the preseason. This is at the heart of the matter for me. I think either quarterback would have been better with those guys back, but I think 2 went to the transfer portal. 1 just retired. I'm not sure what we all expected, but when you have your 2,000-yard runner back and he gets held to 93 yards, 3.5 yards a carry, L.D. Brown actually ran better with the football than Chuba Hubbard did in this game. Chuba, I mean, it wasn't a good look. You've got Tylan Wallace back. First of all, let me back up. I like Oklahoma State's defense, okay? I think those guys are experienced, they're fast, they're furious, and they're in year 3 in Jim Knowles' system. They know what they're doing. I like Tylan Wallace. I love Tylan Wallace a lot. I think this kid, the game changed when they put in Illingworth and decided to start throwing the football to Tylan. He's that good. 4 catches, 94 yards, and a couple of deep pass interference penalties. Again, that's just Tulsa's MO when you throw it deep on those guys, I guess. Tulsa led at Oklahoma State last year at halftime in Tulsa. They led Oklahoma State at halftime this year in Stillwater. Was that game was it 7-3? They trailed, didn't they? Yeah, they took the lead on the touchdown 10-7. That's right. So it was close. So anyway, we've beaten Oklahoma State like a dead horse. They've got some work to do, Parker, and they're going to have to do it all in the Big 12 Conference, which frankly doesn't look that hard to me.
Yeah, certainly so. And Oklahoma State will have an opportunity to rebound, and I would be surprised if we see Chuba Hubbard limited to 93 yards next week whenever the Pokes get back out on the field again. He's obviously among the most talented running backs in the country, if not the most talented. And there's a lot, to be honest, John, there's a lot that was very telling about what kind of a team Oklahoma State is top to bottom in this game, but there's also a decent amount that you can just throw out of the window as growing pains, getting reacclimated to being in an actual game situation, because these guys hadn't seen the field in 9 months and hadn't practiced nearly as much as they expected to, and things are different. And like we were talking about, on some level, you just kind of got to go with the flow and realize that all these teams are dealing with the exact same issues, and there's going to be a lot more inconsistency. So Chuba Hubbard, I think we've seen enough from him to understand and become aware of the fact that he's not a guy that you're going to keep down 2 or 3 or 4 games in a row. He might have an off night every now and then, but it's generally the expectation that he's going to go for 150, 200 yards and a couple touchdowns on any given night. He's just that good. So if he remains the centerpiece of the Oklahoma State offense and they can continue to stake themselves to leads and not have to play from behind like they were doing against Tulsa for most of the game, if they can put themselves in a situation where they can execute a run-first game plan, they're going to be in fine shape.
He had more yards on 2 carries last year against Tulsa than he had on 27 yesterday. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, we're going to take a closer look at Kansas State. Parker's going to tell you all about the two-sport stud and priority 2023 target that he covered last Friday night. And we got some news coming on a 2021 priority target, wide receiver Jalil Farouk.
Hey there, loyal listeners. Parker Thune here with SI Sooners. Are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond, or maybe you're just a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonerssi@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter at @all_Sooners.
Final segment of the SI Sooners podcast. Really looking forward to this week if we can get the games played, as I said. It's the start of Big 12 play. It's the start of conference play. It's week 2, and everybody's playing, we think, right? I mean, Kansas State comes to Norman. That kicks off at 11 a.m. on Fox. Iowa State visits TCU at 12:30. That's TCU's opener because their game with SMU was postponed. That game is on FS1. Texas visits Texas Tech at 2:30 on Fox. West Virginia plays Oklahoma State in Stillwater at 2:30. That one's on ABC. And Kansas visits Baylor at 6:30. You can catch that one on ESPNU. So here we go. Bummer about last week's game between Houston and Baylor. This looked like a lot of fun to me. It was cobbled together at the last second, literally the last second. Like they called and said, "Hey, you guys got an opening this week. You want to play us?" "Yeah, sure, we'll play." It's like a pickup game in the park. Everybody agreed to it. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of planning on the fly with almost no notice. But then it got canceled at the last second because of COVID at Houston. Just terrible news. That game, Parker, was the very antithesis of the Oklahoma Army game, which was literally scheduled to be played this weekend, coming up, instead of K-State. The thing's been on the schedule for 11 years, and then it got canceled last month. So I wrote about that game today. I've been working on this story for a couple of weeks now. The interview that I did for it was like a month ago now. But I've been sitting on it, been waiting on it, been holding it for September 26th week, which was supposed to be the Army week. I would recommend you go read it, SISoonersAllSooners.com. I talked with Greg Tipton, who is the Associate AD for Internal Operations, meaning basically his really big job, his really cool job. You think about a job like this. I would love to have a job like this. Scout out these road games and make sure the Sooners have a smooth trip. Okay? That's what this is about. And it's a good story. I enjoyed writing it. I enjoyed researching what we could have been doing at Army, what Sooner Nation is going to be missing by not playing this game this week at Army. Joe C. says they're going to get it played. I looked at the schedule. It looks like, I hate to tell you this, it looks like the earliest date that this could get played at Army is 2027. They've got road games, and they've either got road games scheduled every year or they've got 3 games scheduled every year, so they're full. I don't know when they're supposed to play a road game at Army. Maybe they can shuffle Tulsa around or something. I don't know. But, Parker, we promised a closer look at Kansas State. They're not playing Army this week. They're actually playing Kansas State. Maybe, again, depending on if Chris Kleiman's got enough players. Is it really all anybody needs to know that they lost their opener to Arkansas State, or does it go maybe a little bit deeper than that, Parker?
Well, John, I think knowing that Arkansas State was down 8 starters and still came to Manhattan and beat Kansas State is a pretty scathing indictment on the state of Chris Kleiman's organization. And again, this year is very much going to be a chaotic season, and really anything can happen. And I don't want to draw too many conclusions based on one game or a couple games or even this entire season in some cases, because it's just such a unique set of circumstances. But look, if Kansas State can't hang with Arkansas State, I don't know how in the world they're going to come to Norman and expect to give Oklahoma any competition. Because, to be quite frank, Oklahoma outmatches Kansas and outflanks Kansas State in just about every single individual position on the field. They have better skill position players. They're better in the trenches. And so, to me, Kansas State just looks completely overmatched as they head to Norman. And granted, they are coming off a victory over Oklahoma, a stunning upset victory at that, in Manhattan last year, and that was quite a contest, and I don't think any of us will forget that one for quite a long time for a variety of reasons. But at the end of the day, you're not going to see that same narrative play out this year. You're just not. And we don't know, obviously, how COVID is going to affect Oklahoma this week, but just knowing that Kansas State is already a little bit ravaged, we don't know exactly how much, but knowing that they're dealing with that just kind of quashes whatever hope really anyone had that Kansas State was going to come here to Norman and give Oklahoma a game. I think you're looking at another blowout this Saturday, John, and I don't think we need to overthink this one much, if at all.
We'll have our picks later in the week, of course, but K-State loses to Arkansas State 2 weeks ago, 2 Saturdays ago, I guess, 35-31. Kansas State had 91 rushing yards in that game. I mean, they replaced all 5 offensive linemen, both of their top running backs from last year, but I sure thought they'd figure out a way to average more than 2.3 yards per carry against the likes of Arkansas State. Meanwhile, on the other side, Red Wolves put together 159 yards on the ground, 4.8 yards per carry, and then they're throwing in the throwing game, I'm going to call it, 25 of 38 for 330 yards passing. They threw 5 touchdown passes, 4 from 2 quarterbacks and 1 from a wide receiver. Crazy. Skylar Thompson, the K-State quarterback, he wasn't bad, 17 of 29 for 259 yards, 2 touchdowns. But how good can your passing game be? How effective can your passing game be as a weapon on offense when Deuce Vaughn and Harry Trotter are your leading rushers and they barely combine for 90 yards? Here's the really bad part. K-State played that game without what Chris Kleiman said was 35 to 40 players total. They had they had a dozen or so, he said, that played in that game who hadn't practiced basically for 2 weeks because of COVID. They were in quarantine. They get out of quarantine. They have to go play a college football game. And then, of course, they had a handful, 2 or 3 injuries during the game. Arkansas State, what do? They come out of that game, and they have to postpone their next game. They just announced it days after playing K-State. Man, this COVID stuff, it is a mess. So, Sooner fans, I'm just saying, we all want this game to happen. We all want to watch college football on Saturday. We all want to be in Norman for another game. I wouldn't get my hopes up. I mean, to listen to Chris Kleiman at his radio show on Thursday, I wouldn't get my hopes up, regardless of whether Lincoln Riley gets back the 20 or so guys from the two deep that he was missing against Missouri State. It might be Kansas State that's gone. That's just too far gone in this thing, Parker, which, of course, sucks. I mean, what options do we have? It's like you said, Parker, 53 men, 7 offensive linemen, 4 defensive linemen, and a quarterback. That's all you need to play in the Big 12 these days, Parker.
Yeah, that's right. And as long as Kansas State has that, I would expect that we're going to play a football game on Saturday. I'm a little hesitant to pump the brakes on this contest just yet, John. But there is definitely, I mean, we heard Lincoln Riley talk about how close Oklahoma and Missouri State were to canceling their game. And I get that the circumstances are different. That's non-conference. Both teams aren't subject to the Big Ten's guidelines and policies that they've set out for response to COVID-19. But at the end of the day, we don't know what tomorrow will bring, ever, in this season, John. And so there ultimately very well might not be a game on Saturday, and we hope that isn't the case. It's going to be a long weekend for us, if that's the case, John.
Oh, man.
But
that's two open dates in a row. No thanks.
Yeah, I would not prefer to have that circumstance come to fruition. But as long as Kansas State and Oklahoma can field a 53-man roster, we're going to get a football game, and as long as there's football, John, I think at this point, that's what we'll take. That's all anybody cares about. We don't really care what it looks like, and you know what? It's honestly kind of fun. It's fun to see Sun Belt teams beating Big 12 teams. It's fun to see everything kind of turned on its head. It's fun that the Big 10 isn't even going to start their season for another month. Like, I get that it's chaotic, but there's a certain element of this that's just kind of super organically fun. And I get that not everybody is maybe having the same experience of this whole fiasco as we are, just sitting here in our respective recording studios in Oklahoma talking about the college football landscape as a whole, and it's a ton different for the players and the coaches. But from where I sit, this has been a really entertaining first 2 weeks of the fall season in college football, and I can only hope that we continue to see college football being played week in and week out, and that by hook or by crook, we're able to preserve this season for as long as is reasonably possible under the current conditions.
You sound like Bill Murray fighting ghosts. Mass hysteria, dogs and cats living together. Jeez, man, you just want it all. You want it all on the table, and you just want it all the cards in a big 52 pickup mess is what it sounds like you want, Parker. But that's okay. I'm going to prefer my football a little cleaner than what we saw on Saturday in Stillwater, because if these two teams are stripped by COVID, we could see that again Saturday in Norman. Let's talk about recruiting. You were able to watch Jacoby Johnson last week as Mustang took on Norman, and you talked to Jacoby tonight. Tell us what you saw Friday night, and then tell us what you found out tonight.
Yeah, so really fun game between Mustang and Norman on Friday night. Mustang ends up getting the victory 34-33 in overtime. They denied a Norman 2-point conversion attempt that would have won the game. I will say this, John. Jaden Bray out of Norman High, Oklahoma State commit. That kid's fun to watch, and he's going to be something special at the next level, I'm willing to bet. Very, very talented wide receiver, tremendous ball skills, great size, and great downfield ability. So when I talked to Jacoby, John, I mean, obviously he was the guy that more than anything I was there to watch, being the Sooners' priority target in the 2023 class, the guy that they're really pressing hard for, and the guy that has an offer in both football and basketball from Oklahoma, which you don't get guys like that very often, John. You don't see two-sport athletes at the University of Oklahoma. And Nathan Rollins-Kabanji is another guy that's going to pursue that, but I think Dean Blevins, John, is the last guy that lettered in two sports at Oklahoma. And so,
wow.
In terms of what Jacoby Johnson was able to do on Friday
in those
night,
two sports. In those two sports, right? Not baseball, football, different.
Okay, you're right. Yes, I should have clarified that a little better. But yeah, the last guy to letter in both football and basketball, I do believe, was Dean Blevins. But Jacoby was limited on Friday night, seemed to be on some sort of a snap count. I hadn't heard anything prior to the game, and so I was kind of wondering why. But saw the game play out, obviously saw Bray play a fantastic game and Mustang get a real close victory. Jacoby didn't have that much of an impact on the outcome of the game. He had a nice kick return, couple catches, fell on a muffed punt, which was big for Mustang. But I was texting back and forth with him, just corresponding about how the game went down and why it was. that he only played maybe 20 to 30 snaps all night, and he let me know that he's dealing with a hurt ankle. He said he was about 85% for that game, and he also said, hey, Jaden Bray is Norman's entire offense, so all we had to do was shut him down, and we knew we were going to win that game, and that's what they were able to do. He wasn't really needed all that much on the defensive side of the football, and so he said, I just got a few reps on offense, played pretty much as he needed to and no more, and Mustang was able to get the victory. He emphasized to me, hey, I'm going to be 100% next time we're out there, and I'm not going to leave the field. So definitely one of those guys in the Oklahoma City area that's going to be a ton of fun to watch. Gosh, tripping over my tongue all over the place here, John. But no, I'm excited to keep getting out to the prep scene on these Friday nights and continue seeing some of these guys that Oklahoma's looking at across the local scene. Obviously, Talon Shetron right there alongside Jacoby, and I was out to Santa Fe to see him last week. But Jacoby Johnson, let me tell you what, in terms of what he brings to the table physically, he is the most athletic player on any field he steps on, and I'm excited to see what he'll be like at full strength whenever Mustang hits the field next.
Yeah, we're going to try to bring you as much recruiting as we can. We're going to try and make it a little bit unique. I got with Broken Arrow's Morion Horn last week. He, again, similarly didn't have a huge impact on the game, but he gave me some time afterwards. We got an interview up at SI Sooners, allsooners.com. Check that out, as well as a short story on Morion. Very exciting player, some very exciting prospects in the state of Oklahoma, and we'll hit some in Texas as well later on in the football season. Fingers crossed. Oklahoma's also hoping for some good news this week, this time next week, I should say, from Jalil Farouk. He's chosen to announce his college choice next Sunday, which is his mother's birthday. If you watch the videos from the Sooner Summit, then you already know that because that's what he told us. Parker, it sounds more and more like Farouk could be a big-time get for whoever he chooses. He's wide receiver, and I'm starting to think Oklahoma might be expecting to get some good news.
Yeah, we've been waiting on this one a while, John. Farouk announced almost 2 months ago now that he was going to commit on the 27th, so we've had to wait quite a bit longer for him than we did for guys like Caleb Williams, Mario Williams, Nathan Rollins-Kabanji, and those guys that set their commitment dates over the summer. But Farouk is a guy that everybody in the Oklahoma recruiting class already, everybody that has committed in this class of 21, they're really, really excited about. And we talked to Caleb Williams, and Farouk is pretty much the guy at this point that he is going after more than any other. The two played together in middle school before going their separate ways for high school. So Caleb obviously works out with Jalil week in and week out. They're good buddies, and Caleb would really like to have Jalil to throw to at the next level. So we'll see what his decision is, but I think it's a pretty good chance that he does sign with Oklahoma and reunites with Caleb Williams, and I'm sure we'll touch on this again on Wednesday, but I think Sooner fans should be optimistic with the decision that's coming for Farouk this weekend.
Listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts, or just go to our website. You know what it is, allsooners.com, and click on the player. Listen to either on your phone, your tablet, your computer, and don't forget to check out the video version. That's there on our website too, SI Sooners, allsooners.com. That's on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. For Parker Thune, I'm John Hoover. See you guys.